Welcome to Diary of a Dreamer, where resilience unlocks your potential. I'm Tasha Eizinger, and each week I'll bring you powerful stories and practical insights from my own experiences and inspiring guests. Whether you're facing challenges or chasing dreams, this podcast is your go-to for motivation, building confidence, and practical tips for transforming obstacles into opportunities. Be sure to check out my website, tashaeizinger.com. Let's dive into today's episode and start turning your dreams into reality. Today we are with Kelli Pearson. She is the founder of Artful Math, which when I heard that phrase, I was automatically curious about what is Artful Math. So we're going to learn about that today. And Kelli has earned over 200, let me make sure I have this right, 200 5-star reviews on Amazon, which is tremendous to be able to do that, for her best-selling book, Kitten Math, which also makes me very curious to learn more. So, Kelli, I know that you like to help people who are not mathy, right? Or maybe don't think that they're good at math and help those people. So I'm really excited to hear more about what you do and how you do it and why, because I think that we all learn differently and you have a unique approach. So thanks for being here today.
Sure. I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and first talk about, like, what do you mean by like the non-mathy people?
Okay. So I didn't grow up as a kid who was naturally drawn to math. And I think that there are a lot of people who don't like math for the sake of it. They're not like into numbers. They're more like they like stories. They love pictures. They're super creative. And numbers don't really have a lot of meaning for them. In my experience, math was just, it was rules and it was rules and facts that you had to learn and memorize. And every year was more things to learn and memorize. They just like piled on top of each other. And they weren't linked to anything. I mean, up until I was in my 20s, if you'd asked me the difference between addition and multiplication, I would have said multiplication has the X. I didn't really understand that they were used for different things, that one was adding, groups, similar groups.
I think it's so interesting too, because you're right that maybe they see numbers in a different way. For those non-mathy kids, they're not going to connect with the traditional way of doing math. So where's
Right.
that gap? Like, what do they need?
So these kids who are creative and visual, they just need to start with a context for math. So they need to see in a real world context, what is the problem they need to solve, or they need to see something written, a picture of something. And often we need to start with like meaningful language. So instead of saying, what's 2 times 6? Then we can say, instead of the times, we'll say groups of. So what are 2 groups of 6? Can you draw a picture of that? And they can draw a picture of 2 circles with 6 dots inside, and they can see what that means, and apply that to 2 groups of 6 in their snack or whatever. So they just need to start with some sort of a real world, which is why when I created Kitten Math, I did that in the first place because I was working at the time as the teacher of a private school, and one of the kids, this brilliant little 4th grade girl named Eliza, she did not understand math. She was like, that was the one thing she could not do, and I learned that she fostered kittens. And I thought, man, if I could teach Eliza math with kittens, she would get it in a heartbeat. And that's what like planted the idea of Kitten Math. And I started coming up with all kinds of kitten related math stuff. And sure enough, she got it. We would start with her kittens and then make math around that. And eventually that grew into me doing math circles with kids. And I started fostering kittens myself because I wanted to learn more to write this book. And so I would bring the foster kittens to these kids
Oh.
at the math circles, and they would measure the kittens and answer questions about averages with the kittens. And so with those kids' help, I wrote this book and changed it. And over the years, it became Kitten Math.
Oh.
And now Kitten Math 2 is out as well.
I love, love, love this for so many reasons. First of all, we learn when we're motivated and interested.
Right.
If you had made it Lego math for Eliza, she's gonna be like, Lego math? I like kittens, right? And
Right.
who doesn't love kittens? I mean, they're so adorable. But also taking something that's so abstract, like 2 times 6, it's so out there of like, what does that even mean? Sure, like a math person's going to see it in their head probably, but to break it down in a way and do that with all math so they can actually see it and then make it practical on top of it, like that's a little bit genius, Kelly, like to combine all of that. And I know you have over 20 years of teaching experience, like over 25, right? Of years of teaching experience.
All kinds of teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, this sounds like somebody who's experienced a lot of teaching with children to be able to do that level of complexity, but make it on the surface just look like it's cute kittens.
Right.
Very clever. I call that sneaky school.
Well, and what I found too, which I thought was so interesting, is when I did start working with kids in this, what has become my Artful Math method now, but at the beginning was just me trying stuff out, like trying out with pictures, with objects, with meaningful language, with all these different things. What I found was that those kids who started out saying I'm bad at math ended up being the ones who had when they approached it through pictures and they approached it meaningfully, they were the ones who were the deepest thinkers of math later on. So you could ask them questions like why, like how did you solve that problem, or why did you do it that way, and they would like walk you through this really interesting reasoning of deep thinking about math. Whereas another child who maybe memorizing the timetables was really easy for them, you would ask them why, and it would just be like, well, because I remembered that that's what it was, but they didn't necessarily have a deep understanding of what they were doing. And so it was just fascinating to me that these kids who were the bad at math ended up being the ones, when they were taught the way their mind wanted to learn it, they were the ones who ended up like really thinking mathematically the way mathematicians really do think about math.
Well, and this is so great too, because you and I grew up in a time period where like this is the formula for the math. And I remember even like some of the kids in my class who were very intelligent, maybe they would skip steps or they would figure out a different way to do the problem and they would get the correct answer and they could consistently get the correct answer. And the teacher would mark them wrong and say, that's not the way we're doing it.
Yep.
And I don't think that any of us learn exactly the same way with the exact same things. So to provide another way for children to learn math, I think this can benefit even the math kids
Oh,
to make sure they
definitely.
really understand it.
Yeah. And also, do they enjoy it? Because, you get a kid who's good at math, and then very quickly they're at the top of the class for math. And so they're expecting themselves to always be the ones who get the right answer. They're the first ones to get the right answer, and they have to like get the best scores. It becomes a very competitive. Math is like, the culture of math is very competitive. And so when you have a kid who is naturally like kind of gifted in math, then it's very stressful for them. And a lot of those so-called gifted kids, they end up some of the most anxious kids, because even if nobody else is pressuring them, even if there's no overt competition happening, they pick up this vibe of that being good at math means you answer really fast and you don't make mistakes. And if you do make mistakes, then does that mean that I'm bad at math? And it's like, that's very precarious, this whole good at math thing. And if they've never struggled with math as a kid, and then they hit like middle school or pre-algebra or something, and then suddenly it feels different or hard, now it's like their whole identity of being good at math was of having it come easy to them, and then now it doesn't. And so Artful Math approaches things not as competition, but as more of like a collaboration and really just play. So kids who have been really stressed and anxious and are afraid to make a mistake. I've had one child, the most anxious child I ever had. She would look at math and burst into tears. And
Oh.
we finally just started playing some games together, and she was doing the exact same math that I had asked her at the beginning of our session. But she was doing the exact same thing and was doing it just fine. And I actually asked her, like, what's different about this? We're doing the same thing as before, and you look like you're having fun, and you're not scared of this. What's different? And she said, well, in games, mistakes don't count. And
Oh,
that was
that
so
is.
telling to me, because it's true. Like, game for kids, there's rules. Math, the rule of math is you don't make mistakes. You don't disappoint your teacher or mom. You have to answer fast. You don't think about it. You don't have to think about it. Whereas games are like, you just do stuff, and then you make, if you get it wrong, you try again the next time, and it's just play. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count. And so, so everything that I do is playful in its base. It's, the word rigor is used in many ways of being like, rigor means it, like rigor has to look like this and you study and blah, blah, blah. I think rigor is deeply challenging yourself in math. And my stuff does have rigor, but it is couched in contexts that are fun and interesting for kids, like Kitten Math, or, like the games that they're playing.
Well, and it makes sense too. If we're having fun, we're going to retain it so much better too,
Right.
and really be immersed in the experience. I mean, I think all the adults listening can think about, meetings and stuff where somebody's just rambling forever. You tune it out. You're not retaining anything. It's boring. It's dull. You dread it. Right. But we do this to kids so often, not always. There are amazing teachers out there, but there's a lot where it's like, math is not something where it's like shiny and fun a lot of times. And so for you to be very aware of that, I think is really important. And I'm kind of wondering, the way that you teach it, does it help with mental math too? Because you're teaching them how to break it apart and like conceptualize it and make it practical. Does it help with that?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So the thing about mental math is, I've bought books that say, to do this kind of problem, here are the steps that you can do in your head to do math mentally. But it's all words and numbers, and again, more things to remember. Like math
And
is
formulaic.
it's only stuff to remember. And so you're going to do mental math by like remembering another rule. Whereas I have a book called Multiplication Facts. It's a little like a bundle on my store. And each of the multiplication facts is shown in like a rectangle or an array of like, 4 by 3 or whatever. So kids learn to like visualize multiplication in a kind of a rectangle, right? And so if they know like their twos, if they know 2 times 5 or 2 times 6, they can like visualize that in a rectangle. And then if they know 2 times 5, but they don't know 2 times 6, then they can do 2 times 5 and then one more. But it's all set up so that they kind of they see it in their mind, right, in the first place. And so if they can visualize it, then that leads naturally to mental math. So if they can think about it in meaningful ways, like in equal groups, or if they're thinking about it in this visual way, then very naturally kids start like taking this picture and this picture and putting them together. They don't have to learn that skill. And so I find that when I'm teaching a kid, and over time they just get used to go to thinking meaningfully and visually about something, and then they'll hit a hard problem and solve it easily, and I'll be like, you answered that really quickly. How did you get that answer? And they'll come back with something that's like one of those mental math skills that people teach, but they came up with it on their own because math makes sense to them. See, that's the thing about the difference between teaching with only rote learning is you're putting the whole learning experience onto the teacher or the textbook. And the whole idea is we teach them how to think about it and what to remember, and then they remember the right things, and then they spit it back out. But if there's no thought going on in the mind of the kid, then there's no room for them to develop these strategies. But when we start out by, like, every time I get an answer from one of my kids, I ask, are you sure? Or can you prove it? Like, right or wrong. I don't just ask it when they're wrong. I ask it right or wrong. Like, are you sure about that? Can you prove it? How do you know? Is that always true? And so they get used to, like, they come up with an answer and then they think about it and they like go, well, does that make sense? And then they'll tell me, yes, I think, yes, this is always true because blah, 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 blah. And so they're always
Kelli.
thinking.
Yeah, I need to interrupt for a second. That is so huge what you just said. We often, when kids get a problem wrong, that's when we ask, what did you do wrong? And why is it wrong? And let's dissect it. And I'm sure they hear a question in math and they start rippling up with anxiety and feeling the anxiety. Whereas you're teaching them, it is okay to be asked, are you sure? And can you prove it? There's nothing wrong with those questions. But when we are constantly asked because we made a mistake or did something wrong, then that carries us through even into adulthood, where we have somebody say, are you sure? We're going to get defensive or feel anxious or worried. You are teaching them such an important skill that carries out into other areas of life. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was too huge not to interrupt you. That is so genius. I love that. Okay, you were on a roll and I'm very sorry, but
No, it's okay.
yeah, so keep going.
Well, so we were talking about mental math and all of that, but really what I find with math is that we think of math as being such a what's the word? It's all like in your head. It's very logical, and it's not, people think of math as not emotional, but I find that math is one of the most emotional learning topics out there. It's just very heavy. The lessons or the experiences we take away from math, we apply to pretty much everything. So if we think that we're bad at math, if a child or an adult, if we think that we're bad at math, all of a sudden that applies to all these other things that we might be bad at, or we think that we can't do. It's just very, I find it's very formative. And sometimes math has been very traumatic for a lot of us. A lot of adults will tell me there's one thing that one teacher said one time when she was in 4th grade. This teacher said, honey, math is not your thing. Focus on reading or something. And that one experience will form them all the years forward. And that is why today they think that they're bad at math. And so there was a time many years ago when I was just feeling, I was in the middle of this, like going from being a bad at math person to not being a bad at math person, and learning about all of that. And I thought, I want to bring together a group of women, because it seems like very often it's women who are in this mindset. I want to bring the women who don't like math and who believe that they're bad at math. And I want to have something at my house where I give them a different experience of math. It'll be 90 minutes long. We'll just see if anybody shows up. I posted something on Facebook. I said, you can't come if you like math, and you can't come if you think you're good at math, and you can't come if you're a man. This particular one was like only for women, because I didn't want them to be, Anyway, so I invited, and 50 people signed up. So I had 25 come to my living room one day, and then the next weekend I had to do it again with another 25. And these, so we just I showed them Fibonacci, like cool patterns in nature, and they drew a Fibonacci spiral. They played games, and I did this hands-on thing with linear equations with like this balance scale and little pawns. And so like within 10 minutes, these women who had never understood algebra were doing linear equations. And at the end, I had
Really? That's so cool.
we had so much fun together. And at the end, I had everybody, write a little, like, what is it, like review, or not review, feedback form, just to see. And to a woman, every single one said that they had so much fun. And this was the first time they'd ever known that math could be fun. And so, so I just have a real special thing in my heart for people, for adults who have like grown up thinking that they're bad at math. And so a big reason why I do Artful Math is so there aren't kids who need to, I don't want kids to ever be left out because math filters them out somewhere through the process. Artful Math like catches those kids who think differently, who would normally be saying, oh, I'm not a math person, go do different things. It pulls them in and says, you are a math person, you just need to learn it differently.
So are you going to do a program for adults?
I am. I had been thinking that I would just stick to kids because that was such a big need, but I have recently decided that I'm going to create a Joy of Math course at some point for adults. That will later be followed probably by a math course for adults in the Artful Math style that just teaches them math much more quickly, because adults learn things so much faster.
Right. Well, we have like that background to kind of help. Yeah, I'm already thinking of people that I would tell them about that. It's, when I was teaching, which I only taught for 4 years in the classroom, but when I was teaching, I would have parents who'd say, like, I can't do their 4th grade math. And I feel for families, that don't have a math person in the home for these kids, and so one of the things I think is interesting, maybe you can explain this to me. I feel like, I focused mostly on English and literature. That's predominantly what I taught. And I only did math 1 year, thankfully, because math is really hard to teach. It's really hard to teach. I think the way that you do it, it would be easier to teach because it makes a lot of sense. But kids, for whatever reason, feel like in math, it has to be worded exactly like their teacher or it's wrong. Is that because of their anxiety, or like, what's your theory on that?
Well, it comes back to the way we generally teach math. We say, this is what you need to do. These are the steps you need to take. And we've seen, like, there's plenty of teachers who will mark you wrong if you don't do it the way they have taught you to do. And that was true for, the traditional math that you and I got when we were kids, and also even Common Core, which that's a whole nother topic, but teachers who are trying to figure out how to teach Common Core say, sometimes they'll now say, here's this new way of teaching math, and you have to do it exactly like that. Like, the problem is in anybody teaching math, that these are the steps. This is how you have to do it. So what I would tell parents is, as much as possible, like, teach kids how to think about the math. And I have a list of, very simple tweaks you can make for it's, instead of multiplication, say of or groups of. Instead of division, say in how many groups. And there's just certain small changes we can make to how we frame a math problem that lets kids be able to solve it however they can solve it. And if you do have a teacher that's like, you have to do it as arrays, or you have to do it in this way, then what I would tell the parent is go on YouTube, like, put in those exact words, show them that exact thing if they need to. But when you're talking about math outside of that, it's, what you don't want to do is say, I think where parents get stuck is if they think I only know this way to do math, and I only know how to teach the steps to this way to do math, and their teacher is teaching different steps. It's not about the steps, right? And so if all you know how to do is teach those steps, then yeah, don't do that. Or, you can, if your kid says that's okay. But if they're like resistant, don't worry about that. Instead, talk to them about what the concept is. So if they're multiplying, that's making equal groups of things and counting them up, like helping them actually understand
Okay,
what they're
so
doing.
does there come a point in math, though, where you really do just have to memorize the formula? Is there like
So,
calculus? I feel like, I mean, you
well,
probably just have.
I'm not going to go there because I'm elementary, and so
Okay, so
after
all through
that
elementary,
things kind
we
of
need,
change. But
yes.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like, okay, so if the fastest way is to multiply with this algorithm, is there a point that you teach that algorithm? And I would say definitely. So for example, I say, when kids are learning a new concept, I use these other words, right? We don't stay with that forever. That's just as you introduce them, they learn those words, they can like make some sense out of it. And then you say, and we call this times, or we call this multiply, and they make that connection. There is a point of time when the way I teach, when I teach meaningfully, it takes more time for kids to solve certain things. If you say, solve this any way you want, like here's this problem, solve it any way you like, it will take longer. It will take time for them to kind of work through that. But after a while, once they have the conception of like what this kind of problem is, then you can say, I can show you a shortcut to do that a little bit faster. Let me know if you want that. And there will, at the beginning, they might be like, no, I don't want that, because they're like figuring something out. But at some point, they'll see it takes them a while to do that every time. And they'll be like, yeah, show me the shortcut. The shortcut is that thing that mom or dad has been like, do it in this steps. That's called the algorithm. And there's a time for that. And once their kid has like a basis, then you teach them that shortcut. And they're like, they know exactly what that is. They're not memorizing something. And if they forget your shortcut, they still know how to do it. If they forget the multiplication facts, they can still figure out 8 times 12 because they have this understanding of what multiplication is in the first place.
I'm so glad you clarified that. I figured that's where you would go with it, but I didn't want somebody listening thinking this is something that you're going to do all through college of
Right.
Kitten Math. Like it's creating that foundation so they understand. They need to understand addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, some decimals, fractions. Like there's things that they need to understand that foundation. So when they get into those, higher level maths, they have the general understanding of what they're doing. Like that's what
Right.
I'm hearing from you. Is that
Yeah.
pretty accurate?
And then there's also a danger if you're just teaching rote learning. If you're just teaching memorization, there are these rules that they get when they're in kindergarten or first grade. Those rules will change in 4th grade or 5th grade, and it doesn't make any sense to kids. So okay, here's one example. Kids learn how to divide, and then they learn that sometimes there's remainders. And with the remainder, they write R1 for a remainder of 1. Well, then the next year in 5th grade, they learn, and sometimes you say the remainder is a fraction. And then later on they learn, and now sometimes the remainder is a decimal. And each time they do that slightly differently. And they're like, wait a minute, I memorized what you told me to learn last year about the R. And now you're telling me no more R, but I do this fraction, or I do this, like, it doesn't make sense because they don't have the foundation of like, give them a context, and then talk about like when there's leftovers, what do you do with those leftovers? If it's cookies, are you just going to throw out the extra cookies, or are you going to split them up and share them? Well, okay, if we're sharing them, then that has to be like a fraction, then you can give 2.5 cookies to everybody. When things are grounded in real life, then all of a sudden kids, you don't have to even teach this stuff to kids. They figure it out themselves. If you ask a kindergartner to share 2 cookies with 4 kids, they will use fractions in their reasoning, even if they've never heard the word fraction, or they don't know how to write the word 1/2. They can rationalize, reason through that themselves.
So does your curriculum? Does it go like K through 5? Like what age levels? Because like I'm loving what you're saying. You're right. Like I think my 4-year-old, she would figure out the cookie thing. She would know. I mean, because things being fair and equal when you're
Oh yeah.
4 is very important, right? And so, but she doesn't know that's what she's doing. So I love that. So like, do you address like the younger kids too, or what ages do you hit on?
So Artful Math is for K through 5. I don't have so many things for the younger grades right now. Most of what I have is from about 2nd grade through 5th grade, but I'm developing new stuff all the time. And one thing that I do have for the younger kids is so Kitten Math is big, right? But then now I have Kitten Math 2. But even after that, they're like, well, what do I do next? And so I created Kitten Math Club, where they get kids get kitten related kitten themed math activities every month. And my cat Sammy, who's this fluffy orange cat, he writes the kids letters every month, and he sends them a secret message in code, but the code is missing some symbols because Sammy sat on it or whatever and smeared some of them. And so each of the activities has a clue at the bottom that helps them fill in the code, and then they get this funny message from Sammy, right? So when I created this club, I actually created a K through 2 version and a grades 3 through 5 version. So that was the first major thing that I have for the younger kids. But there will eventually be many more things for all the grades from K through 5.
That is the sweetest thing. I love it. And here again, you're making it fun and interactive, bringing math to life, which is quite a feat. And I think the big clue is that they get done with Kitten Math 1 and 2, and they're saying they want more.
Right.
That's the clue for everybody listening. If people are wanting more, that means it's quality programming. So how can people get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing? Because I think I want to do Kitten Math in my home, at least during the summer. Like what a great summer project for my kids. So I know I will be wanting more information, but I can access you. So how can everybody else access what you're doing?
So I do have a store. It's called shop.artfulmath.com. But what I would recommend that people do as kind of a first step is I have this quiz called Find Your Child's Math Superpower. Really, I find that kids learn in one of 3 ways. They tend to learn math in one of 3 ways. They're either creative, visual, artsy kind of kid who loves stories and imagination, or you get kids who are just like very active, playful, a lot of movement, and they do fine solving problems as long as it's fun. It has to be fun. But then you have some kids who are just like kind of the traditional math is just fine for them. They enjoy thinking about numbers, and they're kind of logical. So each of those superpowers, the meaning maker, the playful problem solver, and the analytical achiever, it helps if you kind of know where your child fits. And then you can get them the kinds of resources that they need. And so that the resources that they have in my store, you would be able to like go, oh, okay, this would be great for the mighty meaning maker. These games would be great for my problem solver. So they can take that quiz at artfulmath.com/quiz. And they get a page that talks about their child and common struggles, and also the things that they're really good at, and some suggestions moving forward. But their child also gets a packet of their own superpower that has some activities around their superpower, so that the child, because a lot of these kids, if they're not learning it the way their teacher is teaching it, they're not thinking that's a bad teacher. They're thinking, I'm bad at math. And it doesn't take much for a kid to think I'm bad at math. And so when you can reframe that and be like, okay, so I've just found out that you are a mighty meaning maker, and the reason you're not learning math is because it's being taught like with no pictures or no stories. So let's find you math like kitten math with, would you like to learn math with kittens? How about these stories or whatever? And they can like start to see themselves in a different light as well.
Oh my goodness, Kelly, this is so good. Like, I love what you're doing and that you are treating children like the individuals that they are and providing resources so that they can succeed. And I know that that's what every parent wants. We want our kids to be happy, healthy kids who feel good to be who they are. And that's what you're providing. It's more than math, what you're providing. I love it. I know that you had a code for the listeners as well that they can use so that they can get a discount on your products. So could you please share that with everybody as well?
So anybody listening today can get 20% off when they type in the code DREAMER at shop.artfulmath.com.
I hope everybody takes advantage of that opportunity because you're doing amazing things. And, I also think the adults, when their kids are doing the math, like they can learn math with their kid too,
Yes.
right?
And
So
it's
it's a
often
great
very
thing.
empowering for the adult who's always just thought, I can't help my kid with math, can't do math with my kid, when they can sit down and play a game together and they're like actually feeling more connected instead of math pulling them apart or being a source of conflict. They're learning and they're also connecting with their child.
Oh my goodness. So good, Kelly. Thank you so much for sharing what you do. I wish we lived closer. You're too far away from me. Because I know I'd love to get together with you and have coffee or something. You're such an
Yes.
interesting person and making such a big impact and helping people. So thank you for being here today and sharing what you do.
Thank you. This has been really fun.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Diary of a Dreamer. I hope you found the stories and tips shared today to be a source of motivation and strength. Remember, every challenge you face is a chance to grow and move closer to your dreams. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone who could use a boost of encouragement. Please check out my website, TashaEizinger.com.